Okay, let's continue our investigation of secondary sources. In this screencast, we're going to investigate restatements. This will be the only discussion in class that we have on restatements, not because restatements are not important, they are, but because they're fairly straightforward and this is really all that we'll need. So let's dive in. So you may remember restatements or discussion of restatements in your first year classes, maybe contracts, maybe torts, and you might remember that these restatements are drafted by prominent legal scholars and practitioners, and that they are very useful in the research process if you need to find support for a very basic point of law. So if you need a persuasive authority or citation, for instance, on what is consideration for a valid contract or why you might need consideration, the restatement of contracts would be a great place to go. You might remember restatements go through an extensive drafting process, which involves committees, and as you can see, drafts as well as debates. Some of these drafts might be where you would go if you needed to determine why the adopters chose particular language or chose not to use particular language, or just some background for how the drafting took place. But essentially, restatements are a very well considered final product of that particular area of law. So restatements are comprised of different sections, and each section is a statement of a general principle of law, as you can see. Let's go take a look on Westlaw so you can see what a restatement looks like. So here we can see the good old table of contents of the Restatement of Contracts on Westlaw. So we can see restatements are basically divided up into chapters, and each chapter is a general area within contract law. So meaning of term, formation of contracts. For a more involved area of law, the chapter might be subdivided into topics, and then each of those topics will have these different sections of the restatements. So let's take a look at a section 4, how a promise may be made. So the first thing we see after the heading is the actual restatement of the law, Section 4, how a promise may be made. A promise may be stated in words, either oral or written, exactly what you learned in contracts. So that's the very general statement. So of course you're going to want a little bit more detail, and you will find more detail of that general statement in the comment. So within the comment, you get more detail about express and implied contracts. After the comment, we get illustrations. Illustrations are essentially somewhat real-world hypotheticals to apply that section of the restatement. So we see those somewhat real-world examples here in the illustrations. After the illustrations, we see the reporter's note. The reporter's note are essentially background on that particular section. So here's Section 4, and you also see some citations to cases. Speaking of citations to cases, at least on Westlaw here, we scroll down and we see citations by jurisdiction. So we can see cases that cite to the Restatement of Contracts Section 4 in these various jurisdictions. So we can scroll down here and take a look at that, or from the very top, we can go to case citations by jurisdiction to jump down immediately. So going back to our discussion of restatements, we've already just talked about the format. And again, if you need some sort of review on restatements, you'll find this PowerPoint on our course website on TWEN. So how do we find restatements? Of course, the restatements are available in print in the library behind the reserve desk. You'll also find restatements on Lexis, Westlaw, and Bloomberg. We already saw the restatements on Westlaw, so let's go take a look and see how we would actually find restatements on Westlaw. So if we were starting here at the home page on Westlaw, there are a couple of ways we can get to restatements. We would either go to secondary sources, because remember, terminology is important, and now that we know that restatement is one type of secondary source, we know that we'll find it under here. And sure enough, here's the heading for restatements. Nice thing about going this way and pulling up the restatements is if you're not sure which restatement that you need, you can search all of them right here in the search box, or of course if you know which one you need, you can go straight to that particular restatement. Another way to find restatements on Westlaw, which is a way you would find just about anything on Westlaw, is go back to the home page and type it into the search box. I type in the word restatement. I start to see titles getting pulled up, and sure enough, here's the restatement of contracts right here. If we go over to Lexis, here's our Lexis home page. Pretty much same strategy applies. We can type it in the search box if we know exactly what we want. So you can see Lexis pulling it up as we speak. Or we can navigate, browse through using the same exact strategy, secondary materials. And sure enough, Lexis lists for us restatements. And again, we can search all of the restatements in this box here, or we can narrow down to the actual restatement title that we want. And we could search all of restatement of contracts. It says search all the sources on this page, and it's just contracts, so that's what we would search. Or we can browse the restatements of contracts if we wanted to do that. Actually, to get to the table of contents, you do this little symbol here, which is Lexis' symbol for get me to the table of contents. And then I can navigate, if that's how I want to do it, to my particular section. And on Lexis, again, the contents are the same. So we have the basic statement of the law, we have the comments, we have the illustrations. If we want to look at the case citations, we can either click on Citators or Shepherdize. Last, and I have to say honestly least, on Bloomberg, the restatements are available, but in my opinion, they're considerably trickier to get to. The best way I have found, if you find a better way, more power to you, but the best way I have found is go to search and browse. I know that this is a treatise, well, kind of a treatise. Don't get hung up on the definition of treatise, remember? And then if I click on browse, I would have to know it's part of the American Law Institute, or that the American Law Institute publishes the restatements, and then I see the listing here. So if we take a look at the table of contents for the restatement of contracts, we can navigate to our section. Bloomberg organizes the restatements the same way they are organized in print. So if you want to see case citations to particular sections, you actually have to go to the appendix volumes, which you see here below the main sections. And as it happens, the print is organized in the same manner. So back here to finish up our discussion on restatements. As I mentioned, restatements are pretty straightforward, so that's kind of it. As a wrap-up for our screencasts on secondary sources, I'm going to highlight this article for you, What Do Legal Employers Want to See in New Graduates, something I think might be of interest to you, and you will see a discussion on what they want with regard to research on the pages indicated here. Finally, once again, make sure you are logged into TED-Ed and then answer the questions in the Think section.